he woke up in the morning, for example, to go get his coffee. He's sitting there in his coffee. He's on duty, and he sees that they're flying.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you guys flying? I'm the duty flyer.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you were sleeping, and we decided we'd just let the guy who was already on duty go. And he's like,
What?
well, that's not right, but okay. Drinking his coffee and watches the operation, and the helicopter goes over there. A missile hits it.
Everybody dies.
Everybody dies. It's
And
like,
he's like, okay.
that was interesting. That was one of the near-death experiences without him dying.
Yeah.
Welcome
To another episode
of Driving to the Res.
with your favorite hosts,
Larry
and Inelia.
and Peter.
And Petey. We decided to be very vocal this morning.
Yes, she is.
And very loving. Our little puppy dog, if you can't see the screen. Anyways, this episode is called A Journey There and Back Again, which is basically a day in the life of Larry and Inelia. Huh?
Yeah, I thought it was a good jumping off point for conversation because, it was a pretty good journey.
It was.
And it has a lot of orchestrations,
Yeah.
a lot of synchronicities,
Yes.
all kinds of the magic parts of life in it.
It does, yeah, yeah.
So I thought we'd share a day in our journey. Like,
It was pretty good.
yeah, it was a long, long day,
It was a long day.
but it was filled with magic.
It was. Yeah.
So,
It was pretty cool. Yeah. Shall I start reading the article?
okay.
Larry and I have had the most interesting week on synchronicities. Can you say more about that?
Larry and I have had the most interesting week of synchronicities. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like synchronicities as a guide, Mm-hmm. There's guides. We have guides of like, oh, this is terrible, terrible. Like, makes you sick, so I don't go there. That's one guide.
Mm-hmm.
Not my preferred guide. My preferred guides are, I see the synchronicities and I follow the trail, right?
Yes.
Or when I'm looking for something and I have to pick between things, synchronicities in one of them will be the little blinking light that says, hey,
This
look
way,
here.
this way, yeah.
So I like to use those.
Yeah. It culminated with a trip to Renton, Washington, which is about 5 hours from us.
And it's pretty random that we would go to Renton.
What's in Renton?
I mean, Renton.
Well, organically grown and very well loved fruit trees.
Yeah, well, we've been doing a little bit of digging out in the yard,
Yeah.
generating a garden, and recognizing our little fruit trees, our tiny little fig trees that we have on the hill over there. They're like the size of one branch of one fig tree, one little twig. And if you look really, really close, it might be a little bit of green on it. We're not too sure. Either way, there's zero figs, I'm saying,
Right.
and there's no leaves.
Right. And we bought them from one of these commercial places online, which allegedly have great reviews and everything. But unfortunately, we have not had good experiences with them.
Not so far. So
No.
I figure we should try another way.
A local, organically grown tree. Right? That's what we decided on.
Right. So you set the parameters, and then you said, search it.
Search it, please, Larry. Anyways, some days earlier, we had been planning on getting fruit trees for our house on the hill. We tried to locate local sources of strong, organically grown, non-GMO trees, but we didn't have much success. We decided to look for trees on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. Larry's very good at that, and soon he had found a seller 5 hours away who seemed to be a great fit for what we wanted. He says he searches by feel within an area he feels comfortable driving. So within driving distance. And 5 hours is getting
That's
there
the
the
edge of
limit,
it.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
That's the edge of it, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But in our areas, like there's like 5 tree growers maybe, and then when we expand a little bit to Seattle, we get like 5,000. So there's like this fine line, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. Seattle and Portland are about the edge of our driving,
Yeah, pretty much.
and we prefer Seattle to Portland driving.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be the very, very edge, the farthest end. It actually is about the same amount of driving as Crystal Mountain.
Oh, cool.
Interesting. Which is where I went skiing.
Yes.
One of those things. Anyways, is that very, very furthest edge.
It is.
But it had so much sparkle to it.
Yes. The page and the videos, all the things are really sparkly, very nice.
And it was funny as we pulled in. I was like, how? It's like amazing that we could even find this. Right.
Yeah. It's in the middle of a suburb, in the middle of the city.
In somebody's backyard.
Yeah, and there's no signs or anything. You know, there's no way to know that trees grow there.
Or they're for sale.
Or that they're for sale, yeah. The husband and wife team have some land where they grow the trees. Then they bring them to their small yard in the city and sell them there, where she homeschools her young children. She's very diligent that the trees she grows are happy and successful in our climate and area for a few years before reproducing them. Her husband is a trained
horticulturist.
Yeah, with a passion for bonsai. We're most interested in getting a cherry tree for sure, since I enjoy cherries so much. And the trees we currently have produce only 1 or 2 cherries a year.
It's the most delicious cherries, but just
we
one or two.
But we also had plums, persimmons, and fig trees on our list.
Right. She has a whole bunch of pictures of all these different kind of fruits and what they look like, what the insides looks like, how they taste.
Yeah.
I mean, she did a really, really good job of sharing the fruits.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And only from trees that
she grew.
Fruit here.
Yes. In this climate.
In our own backyard.
Yes.
On a regular basis. Those like proven producers.
Right.
So the cuttings from that, she'll grow another tree. And then, you're pretty sure that it should work. Mm-hmm. Right.
The day before, I started thinking about goats.
Which seems a bit random, right?
I know, right?
How we go from fruit trees to goats.
It's all about the week of synchronicities and the journey, right?
It is, because goats, I've been talking about goats for a bit now.
Yes.
We did a little research. We wanted some like Nigerian dwarfs or something.
Right. So many months ago, we started talking about goats and I kept thinking, when Larry thinks, I want a donkey, I want a goat, I want this, all the animals, because he loves animals and I do too, but we have to have a limit. I mean, our limit is huge, right? Yeah. We have like
7 dogs, 30 chickens
and
2 cats.
Yeah. So he said goats, and I said, well, the only goats I would consider are those dwarf ones because they're so cute and they're small and they're
friendly and they're personable.
Yeah. And I can imagine things like that, right? So anyways, the day before, before this journey, before this trip.
To go get
I started thinking about goats, but it was really weird because it was random.
Yeah.
It's very random.
Yes.
Specifically, Daniela, my daughter, getting goats for her land so they would eat the poison oak that grows there. I thought about goats and what type for hours. I didn't mention it to her, or you actually, thinking it would be a conversation we would have in the future, perhaps. But my thoughts were dwarf goats would be perfect addition to her homestead. I just thought about it. I was thinking, and I could see the image of what they look like, and I was thinking they could get one of these play castle things that you get for children. Yeah. So they could play there. I was thinking all sorts of stuff, it's like completely random. In my head, it was going over in my head. Anyway, on the day of the trip, Larry prepared a nice food basket for our trip with sandwiches, drinks, fruits and snacks. And we set off at 8 a.m. in the morning. So you were up since 6 or something preparing it right then.
One of the things when you go on a trip like that, we've learned over time,
Yes.
If we just drive and get in a truck and go, we're going to need to stop on the way to eat or drink.
And then
invariably
get sick.
Having to depend on synchronicity to bring me to places to have excellent food and drink. Also, kind of... it conflicts with my desire to have like McDonald's and Wendy's and deli. Mm-hmm. So I have this like conflicted pattern. It takes me right to the yummy deli. We don't actually eat McDonald's anymore, but
we don't. No.
Delis or whatever. Either way, the food isn't like supportive of you.
No, it's not actually food. It just fills your belly.
Food. And I usually am so starving that I just want something that makes me stomach full.
Yes.
So
for that it works. It fills up your stomach with stuff.
But the food we buy and bring home, it is selected carefully and
Yeah.
So I make a big basket with all the foods that we like to bring with us. Sandwiches and the water that's our good water.
Yes.
Swirled and mayued and got
All
little
the
salts in it.
things.
All the stuff, yes.
Yeah.
All
really
the stuff.
yummy. All the things.
All the things.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll pack that when we go with us. And then it'll tide us over so we don't have to stop anywhere to eat.
Right. On the way there, we listened to podcasts. We randomly chose some without much thought or planning on what we wanted to listen. Generally, we have favorite, but this time, however, we listened and looked for synchronicities to guide our listening choices.
Right. And oddly enough, one of those synchronicities was the poison oak. I don't know if you remember the poison oak showed up.
So the goats. Now you can see the oak. Yeah. So the guy starts talking about poison oak. It's one of these sacred plants and things and whatnot. And I'm like, oh, poison oaks, goats. We need goats. So I have to have that conversation with Inelia because I think goats would be perfect for her.
To get rid of that poison oak.
There's so much poison oak there, you know. So yeah, and then they start talking about. So I started thinking about goats again, of course, you know. I forgot about that bit. Yeah.
So the first podcast was one I had been already listened to the day before, which was a mic drop podcast, and it was a helicopter pilot. And what I found interesting was his life, you know, because the last weeks or so we've been looking at near-death experiences and meanings of lives and orchestrations of lives and these kind of things. And so I kind of had a bit of fascination with guys who pick that kind of life, you know,
right.
The warrior life. And he was a pilot in the 160th, which is the Night Stalkers.
The Night Stalkers.
The elite of the elite helicopter, like go in there and get them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was through
so we had like an hour
Afghanistan.
Left
he was talking about his experiences in Afghanistan and other places. Yeah.
So I wanted to finish it off, and I wasn't sure if you would be listening or if I was going to get it shut off or if you were going to continue to listen. So I just pushed play. It took us down the road, and I was like, oh, it's going good so far. Oh, it's not shut off yet. Well, it was interesting. The stories, there were stories mostly of not like, oh, I went and smacked all these guys. It was these synchronicities and orchestrations that brought him to the places that he ended up being and the situations he ended up being.
Right.
And the many times that, you know, he woke up in the morning, for example, to go get his coffee. He's sitting there in his coffee. He's on duty, and he sees that they're flying.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you guys flying? I'm the duty flyer.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you were sleeping, and we decided we'd just let the guy who was already on duty go. And he's like,
what?
Well, that's not right, but okay. Drinks his coffee and watches the operation, and the helicopter goes over there. A missile hits it.
Everybody dies.
Everybody dies. It's like,
he's like, okay.
That was interesting. That was one of the near-death experiences without him dying.
Yeah. And that was funny because, let me read this.
Okay,
as we listened to his stories and giggled as he used the words near-death experience or NDE to depict times where, by all accounts, he should have died, but by some miracle he did not. We giggled because in our last podcast we used this term to describe one of my experiences. Of course, this is not what these words mean, but it was interesting to have another person use them in that way, which is the wrong way.
Right.
So that was really, oh my gosh, he's using the word NDE to mean that he escaped death.
He nearly could have died.
He could have died if he'd done XYZ, but he didn't do that, or he was somewhere else, you know.
Right.
So that was really fun. That was a synchronicity for me because I've never heard other people use that word in those terms. So that's that, you know, that thing.
Yep. Well, you know, the synchronicity is the near-death experience, which we just had a podcast on last week, right?
Right. Yeah.
And one of the things I think will be interesting to explore in our second hour with regards to this is Fred. He's a expert in helicopters. I'm not sure what his
general, right?
General, yeah, he's a FAA guy, right? Yeah. And his specialty is something to do with helicopters. I think he can fill us in more clearly. But this fella's next experience in one of these helicopters, he's up in the air with his helicopter, and they got shot up with these guns.
Yes.
And all of the hydraulic fluid in the entire helicopter
was gone.
Fell out.
Yeah.
And his stick that he controls the helicopter with
stopped working.
It won't push. He can't move it anywhere. And his pedals Push him as hard as you can. Nothing happened.
Nothing happens.
He's like all dead.
So he says,
and he's in the air flying.
Yeah.
And he's like,
and he tells the guys, sorry guys,
we're gonna die. It's over.
It's over.
There's nothing I can do.
Yeah. And they're getting shot at and everything.
Well, he's well up there, but Fred knows better than probably the rest of us. And he maybe explained this, like when you lose control of the helicopter, the sticks and stuff, it's you only got like seconds, and it's probably gonna die. He said, all we're gonna do is we're gonna slide over, turn upside down, and go crash into die.
Yeah.
It's gonna be over, and there's nothing I can do, guys. Sorry, guys. It's over.
Yeah.
And his crew chief like opened a can of hydraulic oil, like the old school kind with a can opener.
Yeah.
And poured some in the thing, and he had just enough to move the stick a little bit. And I've been thinking, well, go down. And what did he do?
He went back.
He turned around to go back to the top and rescue somebody.
Yeah.
Like, no,
don't do that. Land. No,
he turned around and he started going, and then the stick froze again.
Yeah.
So he opened
realized
up the second can, right?
Put it in there.
And put the second can in there, and like, is he gonna land now?
We're gonna land now.
Oh my God.
So he went down, and then
he went down, and he had to do because he didn't have enough time with the stick to actually go all the way and land. He said he just pointed it in the right direction and made it go down at about 300 feet per minute or something.
Yeah.
He said eventually we're going to hit the ground, and hopefully at that rate we'll survive it.
Yeah.
Because it can't go faster or slower.
And then he had one movement for his pedal, and then one movement. Everything had one movement.
And the net result was they landed. They didn't crash, and everybody lived just fine.
Yeah.
In a helicopter that had no hydraulics.
Yeah. So it's one of those things, it's like, how do you orchestrate that whole thing? I mean, yeah, so his story was filled with massive orchestrations that saved him and the other people on his aircrafts. It was an interesting podcast, but it totally saturated me with war stories. And by the end of it, I was very much done.
Right. I was sure you wouldn't have made it 4 hours. And it was a 4-hour podcast. That's how many stories he had.
Yeah.
And that mic drop guy usually has a couple hour ones or so. Yeah, this one was a full 4 hours and didn't even have commercials.
He didn't have no commercials or anything. He was fascinated by this guy. And he has some fascinating stories, right? He did. Right. And they even talked about NDs. Do you mean, like these other stories? And I think he had one of those also.
He had a couple of actual NDs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that was really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. A few days earlier, we had Decoding the Matrix, our monthly class in focus. In that class, there's a story of me on a hike with a friend of mine. We noticed that although we're in a forest, there's no bird sounds or birds anywhere to be seen or heard. I turned to my friend and said, there's a glitch in the Matrix. They forgot the birds.
There's a glitch in the Matrix. Forgot the birds.
She stopped and looked around, shocked and surprised at the fact that there are no birds there. Suddenly, a bird comes flying towards us really fast, like crazy fast, and smashes against the trees next to us. And then ruffles its feathers, stands on a branch and starts singing. It was hilarious. Okay, I thought a bit too little too late, but okay.
Okay, it's a bird.
We talked about it and laughed. After a few minutes, the forest was full of birds, right? So that was a kind of glitch in the Matrix, and we're talking about that story on our Q&A and everything, right? And after we did our Q&A at walkwithmenow.com about the class, Larry pointed out that now many podcasts we regularly listen to, and some new ones, had birds singing out loud front center on the podcast.
Yeah, it was like right after that class. I was overdoing the dishes, and I turned on a podcast. I think it was Cliff. I hadn't listened to any of his podcasts for a while. I kind of get a little bit tired of him. I was burned out of it. And then I saw one. I was like, oh, I'll listen to see what he's having up to now. And the first thing comes out is there's a freaking songbird singing. Then he starts talking and it's like, oh, that bird's loud.
Yeah. So I wanted to add a little story here, just exclusive for the podcast. So just before you told me about that, not only had we talked about the bird in the class, right? We talked about that bird in the class in this forest some years back. But I'd been thinking about birds, and I got a little bit confused because this was what happened. In the latest class that I'm releasing...
Right, your new class.
A new class called Bubbles of Consciousness. So in this class, I talk about learning perfect pitch from a canary. And I'd been thinking about that.
Wow.
As you talked to me about, oh my God, there's birds in all the
my
podcasts
now.
And I think it's about this matrix class. But for me, it was a different synchronicity telling me that the class is cool and okay.
Yeah, I was telling you. Yes, go ahead.
It's a good class, right? So I thought that was really, really interesting.
Well, moving on to that same trip, our next podcast we listened to, it's one that I haven't listened to yet, but I saw the title to it.
All the
it's
things.
like Raising Consciousness is the name of the podcast itself.
I think hold on, let's
but
I think it's a different name.
No, that's the title of the episode. The actual podcast is something like Raising Consciousness. So that's why I put it on my library. I put it in my library because I wanted to see what it was about someday. And it's been there for a year or something. I never even looked.
Right.
So this time we're driving. And although I was driving, I was trying to find the next podcast, but I was driving very carefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put my phone right in the window so I can see while
He's not breaking the... Yes. Let's not talk about that.
Okay.
But anyways.
So I saw the title to one of them in that I had never watched, and it said, All the Things.
Yes, All the Things.
Which was Synchronicity because...
Well, I decided to use this common sentence a lot in order to expand its use in the Matrix.
Yes.
Because I really liked it. All the things. And it came from a computer game. Okay? And it's like, all the things. And so I thought, that's a really nice sentence. This is months ago. And like a lot of months ago.
Months and months ago.
And I thought, that's a really nice sentence. So I started using it, right? Yeah. And other people, probably who are not on computer gaming or whatever, had never heard of it. But it's quite common, right? It's a common urban saying, all the things. Yeah. And I use it in like all the things as in a positive way, all the nice things. That's the way I use it. But it can be used in a negative way also. However, I just like the sentence and I started using it. So for Larry, when he read the title, All the Things, for him was, I'm going to save that.
One. We'll watch it.
Yeah.
So I pushed play and we watched that one. And then
we listened to it.
As we're listening to it, it's about an hour long. I was wondering, it was a bit of a strange podcast. I couldn't quite figure it out, to be honest.
Right, but there's a lot of birds.
So many birds in it. And he ended up being in Vilcabamba.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Vilcabamba is yet another synchronicity because you had an event there and you almost moved there.
Yeah, I had land there.
Land there.
I was given land in Vilcabamba to move there. About 14 years ago.
But it was just like right after I had talked about the songbirds and cliffs thing.
Yeah.
Then I played this one.
Yeah.
It was end to end.
Funny.
Roosters and birds in Vilcabamba, Ecuador, and all that. Blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite funny. Well, after we listened to that, we got there, right? We got to Renton.
Yeah, so we got to Renton and saw that the main tree we wanted, a cherry tree, had sold out of all the small and medium-sized ones. She only had 2 large ones, which cost the full budget we had brought with us.
They were so expensive for one of those trees. It was like...
But it was fully grown,
It had the leaves and had cherries on it. It was sort of like 10 foot tall, both of them. But our whole budget for all the trees
would be one of those.
Was the equivalent of one of those. I don't think so.
We were both disappointed because I love cherry trees and cherries are one of my favorite fruits.
That was one of the main reasons that we went.
Yes, we were presented with a choice of 1 cherry tree or 10 smaller mixed fruit trees.
Yeah.
Larry told me how he had imagined how much I loved eating the one lovely cherry on our present cherry tree, gave us last year 1 cherry, and really wanted to get me more of them.
Yeah, I kind of did what I feel is my instant manifestation technique to some degree. It's like, I don't understand why we don't have a cherry tree, but okay. I
imagined the whole thing.
Imagined the most delicious cherry you ever had in your life. I imagined you eating it, and I imagined us there, and I was like, well, I don't understand why there's no cherry tree here, but I will just release it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So we looked at the rest of the trees and examined each one for a long time. We ended up with 2 persimmons, 2 pears, 2 fig trees, 2 plum trees, and 2 almond trees.
Almond trees.
I know, 2 almond trees. Yeah.
With they're called fuzzy almonds. Fuzzy almonds.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Very cute. They're beautiful.
And she must have had like 100 trees there.
Yeah, she did. What is it, babies? Come here.
She says, come over here and work.
Yes. Come here. She wants more food, I think. This always happens.
It always happens. We could keep
Okay. The couple was super friendly, and they were telling us what to do with the trees when Larry spotted a table covered in bonsai trees.
Yeah, it was a little bonsai tree that looked like it has a rose on it. It was a quince.
They were stunning.
Stunning.
Honey, come over here and look at this bonsai, he shouted. So I went over, looked at the table, and spotted the most beautiful bonsai I have ever seen in my entire life.
Remember, at this time, we were like trying to put our trees in the truck and leave.
We were leaving.
Already filled all our bill out, and it's like almost used up all of our money. You had like searched the whole house and found all the money you could find, stuck it in your pocket. Like, that's how much we have.
Right.
Because it's cash only there. They don't take checks. They don't take credit cards. They don't take PayPal. They don't take Venmo. They don't take all the wayos. Only cash. So we had a strict budget.
Yeah.
And we'd pretty much spent it all.
It was white bark, small little leaves, an amazing shape, and the most stunning little pink flowers covering its trunk and branches.
Oh.
I was in love.
She fell in love with this little bonsai tree.
It was
the one I saw was a
beautiful.
quince.
Yeah. I saw it and it's like, just walk past it, isn't it?
Like, it had the most beautiful little rose flower on it. I thought it was a rose, but it was a quince. And then there was a table full of pine trees and whatevers. And
there was lots of
little tiny bonsais.
Beautiful,
right?
all of them. I mean, gorgeous.
But you fell in love with the flowered one at the end.
It's a cherry tree. It actually produces most amazing yummy cherries, the lady said.
She said they grow and they make the red. And they're the red like a maraschino. They're super bright red, like berry cherry. The most delicious cherry she's ever eaten in her whole life.
You know, it's like, it has this, the bark is white.
White.
And it was covered in the tiniest little pink flowers.
Yeah.
The whole tree. And it was like, oh my God.
It's just so
stunning.
Of course it's not for sale. It's his freaking prize bonsai. He said, what year is it now? 2024. Oh, it's 23 years old.
Oh, I thought you said 25.
24. 23 years. 2001 is when it was grown.
23, okay.
So anyway, I was like, obviously it's not for sale.
Right.
It's his I don't know what.
And he said,
prized possession that he's been growing for so long.
Yeah, but he said, no, I'm selling these.
He said,
well, then she said it. Yeah,
she said that they would sell it because they don't have a greenhouse anymore to put it in. He said he would consider it and they were scaling down. So it wasn't like there's the price tag on it and it's stuck. Like all the other trees have a tag on it and a little thing that shows their price. And none of the bonsais have for sale on it or nothing.
Right.
But this one,
oh my gosh.
Like, well, it has to be in the greenhouse. I don't have a greenhouse anymore. I'm ready to move on, but it has to go to the right home.
Yes, I'm just finding a home. It says the price is $380, but it's to cover the cost of the pot, which are really expensive.
Special bonsai
the soils
pots,
are really expensive.
Soils, whatever.
An actual tree that he must have bought from somewhere, you know. So basically, he was recouping the cost, right?
Yeah. And we'd already spent our budget.
Yes.
It's like,
and she had given us $400 worth of free trees because of the large amount of trees we'd bought. You know?
So we're like, well, we can't make money out of nothing.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
It's like I got exactly how much we got. Yeah. We don't got more. I said, well, I can't PayPal you, so I don't know.
I can't pay you the full value.
But we really want that cherry.
Yeah. But, you know, we can give it a good home.
I said, we do have a greenhouse.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
And he said, well, in that case. And I said, and you can come visit it. And we have a beautiful lake right next to our house. You can come swimming with your children.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden it was like, oh. He said, yeah, you know, these trees, the ones that I'm going to sell, I don't care if somebody has all the money and they're not the right house. I'm not giving it to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's only going to the right house.
Yeah.
I said, I like you guys. I said, well, we have X amount of dollars. Is that enough dollars for all our trees and a cherry? And he said, yes. So he didn't give us a discount on the cherry bonsai, but he gave us a discount on
other things.
Some of the other 10 to make it up for it. That's the way it worked. It worked out in his mind. It was quite
We expected it to be thousands of dollars, but it wasn't.
Oh, yeah. I expected it 20. I mean, one of those cherry trees was a couple grand.
Yeah, the large ones, right? Yeah.
So bonsai should be worth double or something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He wanted money equivalent to his costs only, but most importantly, had to go to a home he approved of. And the key word for him was that we had a greenhouse. That fact alone, that we now have a greenhouse, is in itself another of those odd stories. A consequence of a yes honey experiment that, among other things, resulted in a greenhouse in my upstairs deck, which clearly was a requirement for this beautiful cherry tree to join my life.
Like an orchestration
if you've
from
seen
a
the
few
second
weeks
hour,
before.
yeah, if you've seen the second hour from a few weeks ago, you'll see an experiment that Fred and Larry started on a yes, honey.
Just that whatever you say,
You say
honey,
yes.
whatever you ask, just say yes.
Yes, say yes.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
So we were in Costco and looking at these beautiful stuffs, and we walked by a greenhouse, and it's pretty big, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty big.
And we walk in, and oh my God, the smell is just so nice.
Yeah. And you have to assemble it, so it comes in a box.
Yeah, it's like one of those
Larry's
IKEA boxes.
Not favorite things for Larry.
Imagine an IKEA box times 1,000.
Yes.
There was 3 of those boxes, or 2 of them, and they had about 10,000 parts inside of it.
And I said, honey, can I have this greenhouse?
I was like, yes, honey.
Oh, and by the way, if you want to listen to and support us, and listen to the second part with our panelists, where we deep dive into all these subjects, you can go to Substack, right? Search for Inelia Benz Substack. You'll find our Substack, and you can get the links to the second hour right there.
Yeah, easy to go, easy to find. Plus the articles there.
Yes, the articles there, the first hour's there, which you're listening to, obviously. But if you want to go into the deep dive on the second part of this podcast, go there, and you can support us as well. It's great.
So the greenhouse was an orchestration. Mm-hmm. It took a lot of things to be put in place to get a yes out of it. Let's buy a put together greenhouse that I have to put together.
Yes,
that'd be like high on the list of I don't know how.
But you had help because
I ended up getting help from Fred because Fred
Brett
said yes, and Brett helped.
Yeah,
I didn't have to do it alone, but man, oh man, that was a lot of pieces.
It was,
1,000 pieces, but it needed to be there and already up in order for your cherry tree to come home that you fell in love with in the future.
Yes. Indeed. On our way home, we listened to Joe Rogan podcast, which I have to say was one of the most fascinating podcasts I have heard from him.
We don't really listen to a lot of Rogan.
No.
Every now and again.
Yeah.
When in this case there was a synchronicity again with the title and the who was it. It was a very odd name. I've never heard this name before, right?
He was interviewing a man who talked about all the things we talk about. Things like Mandela effect, NDEs, computer games, simulation theories of reality, and more stuff. I mean, he was fascinating. This man was fascinating. I have to find more about him, including his name.
And the biography of a yogi book.
He talked about that too. Yeah. We will have the name and everything on the show notes, so you can go and listen to these podcasts.
If you're interested,
if you want to.
Yeah.
This is interesting because we have been discussing ways and topics that can reach a broader audience. We do want to reach larger audiences in order to deliver the message of empowerment to them, but have been hitting a wall for many years now. During that last podcast, Joe sounded bored and disinterested. We find this to be a great data point because he's literally the representation of millions of people around the world. Larry and I were sure he was falling asleep during the interview.
It was, generally, he's the best podcaster in the world, right? And he's enthusiastic and very skilled at this. And this fella's talking about these topics,
which we find fascinating.
And they're topics that some of them he never even heard of the Mandela effect.
He'd never heard of the Mandela effect. I was like, what?
And NDEs, he just barely even But
it was fascinating, wasn't it?
When he would get into it a little bit, he did have some knowledge of it.
Yeah, and some
questions. But it was pulling teeth to get him engaged and interested, right? So that was an interesting data point because to reach the masses, which Joe Rogan clearly does, right?
Well, it's 2 things. One of them was, if we can reach somebody like him without him falling asleep, right? Then we
will
got
be able to reach others.
Yeah, but also he's opening the doors to those masses to these topics. So now people who hear him might go out and find us.
There you go.
Do you see?
I see. Ding, ding, ding.
We stopped at the hardware store for some ground salt for the trees and some lumber for some work we were doing at home. Then another store for a toaster and some CO2 canisters to make sparkly water. While there, I received a message from Daniela telling me that they were getting thousands of dollars worth of goats as a rescue operation in the area. Animal control had notified the owner, who was out of the country, that they were going to take the neglected herd the next day. The goats needed to be rehoused before animal control came for them. The goats are dwarf variety. Larry shouted, "Dibs on the babies!" I can imagine we have goats in our future, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
So the goats showed up clearly.
Yeah. So it's like that. That was the other part of the synchronicity. Daniela wasn't planning on getting goats.
No.
Right?
Her neighbor has goats.
Yeah, and then the goats the day before, I'd been thinking about goats and Daniela, you know, and there was something else about goats also in one of the podcasts. I think it was the Vilcabamba one, maybe. I don't remember. But they just kept coming in.
Poking their head in.
Yeah. I don't know if it was actually because I was nodding off, but maybe I was dreaming it. And the goats, yeah, the dwarf variety that I'd been thinking about, that would be perfect for her, you know. All right, so we stopped regularly on our way home to check on the trees. They told us that this was the strongest windstorm they had ever experienced in their lives. And they would be happy when things calmed down a bit.
Yeah, it was pretty wild back there on that trailer. They were wrapped up with plastic and laid down and everything, but it was still blowing like 60 or 70. And it was a bit of an earthquake all the time.
Yeah.
So trees were like, I don't know what's going on. We were in heaven with our dad and our mom, and now it's like stormy and earthquakey, and where are we anyway? What are we doing?
We told them soon we would be home, sweet home, and they would get a big drink and a hug.
which they did.
It was close to 9 p.m. by the time we got home. Brett, my son, and Larry unloaded the trees, watered them, and explained to them that the trip was over. They were home.
Yes.
And that was our journey there and back again. Which actually, the journey there and back again is a reference to the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, is
the
it?
Hobbit, yeah.
I'll be darned. Well, it's something of a, like, our day often are magical in that way.
Yes.
From start to end, there'll be synchronicities. There'll be things that we follow like that. There'll be, you know, I think about this thing and then it becomes, you know, the goats, the cherry tree. Even when it doesn't seem like it is, sometimes it just takes a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm. And there was another little story actually of synchronicity that I wanted to keep for the podcast.
Oh, what's that? Is that the hummingbird one?
Yeah. So, I think it was in the same class, wasn't it? The Matrix, the Decoding the Matrix, that I talk about a little story of when I was a little kid. Oh no, maybe not. No, it wasn't. No. So I've told this story. I can't remember when or where, but I've told the story of when I was a little kid. I used to be able to walk to hummingbirds and pick them up and stroke them and then release them, right? And I told this story on the new class, the Collective Bubbles class.
Yes, the Collective Bubbles class.
Yeah. Exactly. So I told this story in the Collective Bubbles class. It's probably going to be released by the time you're listening to this. And so the story is very simple, and it's like when I was very small and like a toddler, probably just maybe a little bit older, maybe about 4 or something like that, I would be fascinated by hummingbirds. And my mom had a flower garden. And they would be full of hummingbirds. And there was one particular flower tree that, or maybe a bush. For me, it was a tree because I was so small, where the hummingbirds would come to all the time. And I would go there and I would want to pick them up because they were so shiny and the feathers would change colors and they were so beautiful. So as I walked to the tree, the hummingbirds that were buzzing around on the flowers one of them would sit on a branch for me. And I would go up there, grab it in my hand. I would have to use both hands. And I would pet it, with my finger. Pet its little head, It was just so beautiful. And they would look at me with their little eyes and blink, 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 blink for a little while. And then when I was done, I would open my hands and they would fly away. And this happened lots of times. Anyways, when I was doing the class, that story came into my awareness. And I was like, oh my gosh, it makes total sense because I was stepping into the collective bubble of the birds, of these hummingbirds. It makes total sense now. Of course, as I grew older and social programming came in, I wasn't able to go and pick up birds from the hummingbirds. I mean, they barely ever sit down on a branch anyways, but I wasn't able to do that anymore. And I don't remember the last time I touched a hummingbird. It was probably when we rescued one from somewhere,
Remember we got the little rings and we tried to get them to come sit on our
That's right.
rings.
Yeah, the shaman show. We got little rings with nectar on them. And they would come and sit on you and your, so that was the last time I think, yeah. But I didn't actually hold one.
Hold them, no.
They would just sit on my hand or my head or my shoulders. Yes. But I didn't get to hold one. So the day after I finished the class, Larry calls me in the sunroom. We have mostly covered the whole area with mesh so that the insects don't come in at night. And there was one little area that doesn't have that insect netting, and a hummingbird went in, and our cat Brad was after it. So we went out there, and I said to Larry, "You need to get a step ladder because it's too high. I can't reach it." Because he just came in and said, "Yeah, you need to hold the hummingbird. You have to grab the hummingbird." Because he knows the story of me. I'm like, I can't do that anymore,
But you need to, honey.
You need to. You have to do it.
Otherwise, Brad's going to jump on our screen and ruin the screen and kill the bird. So all bad
you have
things.
to do it. So I went out, grabbed the cat, put it in the house, closed the door, and told Larry to go and get a step ladder. But he brought a brush instead.
So I
don't know about a step ladder. He was trying to herd the hummingbird out through the little gap again, and then it started coming down. I thought, I can reach that. Yeah,
instead of going over and out, it just kept on coming down and down and down right to where Inelia was.
Yeah, so I reached out and grabbed it. Obviously, it didn't want me to grab it. But what surprised me instantly was that when I grabbed him, it didn't struggle. And I mean, I've rescued other types of birds in the house.
Yeah,
they're wriggly and trying to get away from you, But this one just stayed very quiet and still. My first thought was, oh my gosh, he's dead.
He had a heart attack.
Or something. But I looked at it and he was looking at me, blinking his little eyes, just like when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's strange. So I came around the other side of the house. And the cat was still inside the house. And actually, I let him into that side because he was fascinated. So I thought I'd come out here. And I opened my hand. And he was just laying there, looking at me and blinking. And I could feel its little heart in my hand. And he wasn't like odd. It was alright.
It was normal.
It was normal for a hummingbird. And I thought, I must be terrified. Maybe he's exhausted or something. So I closed my eyes again and put him in my pocket with my hand around him. Because I felt, he wants to hang out for a bit. Maybe he just needs to recoup his energy. He was exhausted. In my mind, he was exhausted, right? So I came out here, you brought me a little glass of sugar water.
Sugar water, very well. Maybe he needs some energy.
I tried to give it to him, he was ignoring me, but he opened my hand again and he was just laying there, looking up at me, blinking its little eyes, just like when I was a kid. So I started petting it, just like when I was a kid, I pet it. And he was like, happy. And then it's like, we were there for quite a while.
It was several minutes,
yeah. Several minutes. And then I was looking at him talking and say, well, what are you going to do? I don't think you're injured. And he kept looking up at me and blinking its little eyes, just like when I was a kid. And that imagery kept coming back to me, And then I went to reach for the sugar water again. And he looked at me one last time, blink, blink, blink. And then went off, into the distance. And there was nothing wrong with it. It's like, whoa, well, that's like an orchestration or like a synchronicity, because that was the first for me. It was like a validation that class is cool and it's ready to come out now,
Right, because that class has been a challenge.
Yeah.
It's like, is this one really going to be like...
Right, and it was like when I was listening to it thinking, I don't know if people will understand it, but it's really key information that can really empower a person, And that to me was the validation of the human collective, Gaia and everything. Yep, it's like we're ready for it. Because I was also thinking about every millisecond, even the day before, like every millisecond of our lives, for it to happen and evolve and our experiences we're having, things started thousands of years ago to orchestrate that particular second or that moment or that experience. Like, when did hummingbirds arrive in the United States or this area or evolve here or whatever, And that must have been thousands and thousands of years ago. And that particular hummingbird, all the generations in the area for it to be born here, live here, or travel here from wherever it was born to nest here. And because there was another one, right?
Was, the mate outside.
Yeah, trying to help it. So all these things happening for that moment to validate, and the experience is so radically different to other experiences that I've had in life and other people's experiences with hummingbirds. Especially the blinking little eyes looking at me in a very specific way, like face on, looking at me, blink, 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 you know. So that to me was really significant. And to me it meant, yeah, that class is cool, you know. It's really cool. It's spot on. You just don't have to work on it anymore. It's fine. And so that was another synchronicity that I wanted to share, again with birds. And remember when Larry started talking about all the birds on his podcast, I forgot that he hadn't listened to the class yet. So I thought he was talking about that story. And then he said, oh yeah, about the, you know, the Decode in the Matrix, the Decode in the Matrix and
Songbird.
The songbirds. Oh yeah, and the class also has another thing, like I said earlier, about the canaries. So I thought he was talking about that, but he hasn't even heard the class yet. Yeah. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
So keep your eyes out for that class. If you're on Subscribestar, it'll be on the class part of the Subscribestar, right?
And Walk With Me Now for classes.
Now has it in classes also.
With a ton of other classes.
And you can get it a la carte, even. Telegram's the easy way to find it, or go to our website.
Yep, ineliabenz.com.
ineliabenz.com.
Yeah.
And we'll see you in the second hour now.
Yes. See you in a few minutes.
Bye.
Bye. When this happens to me, when I look at something and I see things and then I go back and try to show it to somebody else and they're gone, it's because I've seen them with my inner eyes. And when I see something with my inner eyes, it means it's being hidden at an occult level. But because I've had that training, I can see it. So that means it requires further investigation because there's something going on here that's not clear to, it's not fully on. But what I did notice is that this person was actually revealing things that would validate the original seeing. Yeah. So sometimes the vision or the message or the synchronicity is for your eyes only, right? But it doesn't mean it's an invalidation of another person. Like, wait, she's so advanced, but she didn't see it, type energy. No, she didn't see it because it wasn't her journey. It wasn't her message. It wasn't her synchronicity. It was yours.